What it do? What it do? It's your boy B Hop from Shenanigans with B&B, bringing you esoteric, metaphysical, philosophical, psychological based concepts. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, please go ahead and do that. Yeah, let's get into it with your boy, man. Today we're reacting to a video by Marcus Aubrey. I'm not too familiar with the guy, but he definitely interviews some good ass people. And today he got on Robert Grant. I looked into some of his work. He's a known mathematician. Basically, he gets into geometry, esoteric knowledge, and stuff of that nature. But I'm just gonna be reacting to their video today, seeing what they're getting into for real. Let's get into it.
The truth is that we're all the master, we're all the healer, we're all the mystic.
Give it up one time for Aubrey Marcus.
All right, that's the interview. I'm at the intro.
Robert, I had a whole way that I was going to enter this podcast, and then my wife brings out her Tibetan bowl and starts singing, and I have tears coming down my eyes because this typically happens to me when there's something that I've forgotten, even if it's temporarily. And I think in the last few days, I've been very
started
much
the
in my
podcast
masculine,
crying.
very much deciding, planning, plotting, doing things in a very active expression with very masculine archetypes and people. And as she was singing, it started to reawaken the feminine side of my soul. And as I remember, then the tears wash away the forgetting. And so here I am, and this is such a big part of your message and a message that's been encoded potentially for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, however far you want to trace back the Great Pyramid. So this is a big topic to start to enter.
What topic is
but
it?
Ultimately, let's start there with this balancing of the feminine and masculine expressions of ourself, and then we'll get into all the mathematics, the necessity for being a polymath, or what they used to call a Renaissance man, and so many other ways and places I wanted to go. But just take for a moment about this necessity and this cathartic remembrance that I just experienced.
Well, two things I had noticed off rip. I just wanted to clarify. When he's talking about, most of us know that every male has a female aspect and every female have male aspect. It's part of the whole biology of our makeup. Your left hemisphere represents your masculine, analytical, logical. Your right hemisphere represents more creative, more emotional, more in tune with nature and stuff of that, subtle energies. And he also spoke on polymath, which I learned that term like 2-3 years ago, but that's something I feel affinity to, because I don't just study one thing. Like, my mind, it goes all over the place, but I try to keep it organized, and to try to bottle me into one subject matter or one topic is very hard. Polymaths are very well adept in multitude of subjects and problem solving, and this is what my man Robert Grant claimed to be right now, a polymath. So let's get back into it.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I think that it was not long ago that I heard a great quote actually on one of your podcasts. And I think it was, I can't remember the name of the woman it was on your show, but she said that the one divided itself into the two for the joy of becoming one again. And to me, that's a really beautiful statement. And I would even expand it to say the one divided itself into the many for the joy of becoming one again.
That was Emily Fletcher.
Emily Fletcher. And I think that this is the moment in time where
Okay, so again, it's like about doing the work. So when he's saying that, it's like, if you ever heard of the Hermetic law of duality, basically is, the concept of being dual and separate from oneself, or having two sides or two poles. And it's only an illusion that we're separate. Most people in quantum psychology and other realms of knowledge realize that we're all having this global experience, but it's like really one experience. And we perceive it as individual experiences. So our perceptions, we all got different perceptions, but the whole goal to life is to really, get to understand each perspective and come in communion with each other again. Some woo way wee shit, but the more I study and the more I realize that it's like, yo, we really are all some same people. We all want the same things, and we play out the illusion. Our ego try to separate us from everybody else, but you are everybody else. I am you, you are me. That's the Ubuntu saying, and I am the way that I am because the way you are. You know what I'm saying? It just goes full circle, for real, for real. Let's continue.
Humanity is going through that.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, it's not just an optional choice at this point. Now it's time. It's time to really do this. And the consequences are at a stage where playtime's over. Recess is over, kids. Now it's time to really do the work. And I think a lot of people are looking at solving the problems from a purely technological standpoint, which all has its place. Yeah. Sure, if we want to remove the acidification of the ocean through some technology, or if we want to...
When he's saying do the work, is really like take the time to look into yourself. COVID gave a lot of people the notion to sit down for a minute, like stop moving all fast, reflect on yourself a little bit, reflect on your actions, reflect on your family members and people around you. And that's what it means by doing the work, is it's time to actually look within, stop being external in the world, try to internalize some things and see the subtle energies for what they are.
Great. I'm not saying not to do this, but I think the big move that needs to be made is a shift in consciousness. Because without that shift of consciousness, that's sitting upstream. That's the poison pill at the fountainhead of all of the things and systems that are, across the world.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that we are a society that has become, at least for the last few thousand years, very dualistic in so many aspects. I mean, we've been in this age of Pisces, which is two fish tied together but going in opposite directions. And thinking that one is the light and the other is the bad, one is the good, one is the bad, and it's this duality perception. And we don't even realize that our own perceptions are driven by our own conditioning biases, that we don't know that the things that we think are ethical are very often the things that are just benefiting us in our own conscious mind. And then we want to enforce that on everybody else because we tend to see the world as we are rather than as it truly is. And we have sort of lost our ability to empathize. We are looking at it from our perspective. Our ability to step in another person's shoes and see their perspective on the world. That muscle of empathy has really become vestigial or completely, atrophied. And I think this is because we are a society that's so stuck in either thinking left brain or right brain, and never the twain shall meet. So we have some people in the world, thank goodness, that, are the artists and the creators and the people that are the ones that bring joy and music into our lives and imagination and creativity. And then we have the other aspect of society, which is very left brain.
Yeah.
And that's probably more the pathway that I came through. I ended up starting off life very much feeling like, okay, I'm a Taurus and I need to have everything understood in the material sense. I need to understand the materiality of the world. And I think along that path, at some point, I realized that I was too far in the extreme. As you get to that middle point of life, you end up having sort of a midlife crisis. And I didn't buy a Porsche. I already had a few. So maybe my midlife crisis started when I was in my 20s.
But my man was balling.
but certainly I felt imbalanced and not in touch with my heart.
It's funny that just as a bracketed side note, that the solution that
jump
people
more into the
apply
material and
in
rather
this
than
midlife
into
crisis
itself.
is, I know the problem. More of the same.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
so true.
I'm feeling a problem,
That's
but if
right.
I double down, the problem will solve.
But
More
isn't that
materials. Let me get
how
more
so many
things.
people
Of course.
sort of try to attempt to solve their problems without realizing that everything that we judge in this world around us is what we will attract until we no longer judge everything we attracted. And so what happens is we start to think of ourselves as a hammer that's always looking for nails. And hammers have a way of finding.
All right, yeah, I say this to my friends all the time, people around me. The exact energy that you're putting out is the exact energy you calling to receive. So, at the same time, people sometimes don't see their behaviors and their tendencies and their mannerisms, and they wonder why the world treats them the way that they treat them. But it's the energy that you're putting out. If you do a little bit of self-reflecting and, get some input from other people around you and see why you're being treated the way you're being treated, you might be able to tune your attitude a little bit and adjust to get more of the love that you're trying to receive. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's how it is. You sometimes don't see yourself, and truth hurt more than anything, so it'll surprise you.
nails.
Let's unpack that a little bit because, one of the guides for me is a gentleman named Paul Selig who channels, who he calls the guides, who go by a name that sometimes is given Melchizedek, but his words are just ring so true, and I'm always first skeptical of everything that anybody says like that. But he says, if you put anyone in the cave, meaning judgment, the cave of judgment, then you go in the cave with them, right? And so you're saying what you judge attracts. So, okay, so anybody you judge or anything you judge, you go into that place of judgment with them. Then you apply the law of resonance on top of that, which is like attracts like. Mm-hmm. So if you are judging, you then become in resonance with that thing you were judging, and then through the law of resonance, you are going to attract more of that thing you were judging.
It's kind of like what we used to say on the playground in, elementary school. I'm rubber and you're glue. Everything you say bounces off me and sticks to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
It's this kind of concept where we don't realize that the way we see the world around us and all the things that we see in other people, if we spot it, that's a trigger for us. And the thing that we spot is actually what we got. Mm-hmm. So I used to always say this all the time and say, well, if you spot it, that means you got it. The thing that you're seeing in other people that you don't like about yourself, that you don't accept about yourself, because you press it into your subconscious, you keep it outside of your persona, because we all think that the persona is the thing, and when we look in the mirror, that's how the world sees us. No, we only have eyes in the front of our head. We can't see full 360. We can't see 180 degrees, right? We can see 180 degrees with our peripheral vision, but we can't see the other 180 degrees. That other 180 degrees is what other people can see. And that's why it can be so valuable to do what's called a 360-degree review with somebody.
Okay, so I know that persona thing, in astrology, they talk about your persona as being the sun, your sun symbol, which is whatever astrological symbol that you are. That is your persona. That is what you know about yourself. But what he's talking about is the other 180 view that you can't see about yourself, that you need reflection on, is the moon sign. So I understood that through astrology, that we all only understand 180% of ourselves. And this is why people use therapy, talk to their friends, or, they need a heart-to-heart sometimes, because sometimes you need a little bit of feedback on yourself to understand yourself more, because you don't know the true aspects of yourself. We all have what they call a shadow nature. So yeah, that is pretty dope, because a lot of people need to do a little bit of self-reflecting. And I know I spend my time doing self-reflecting all the time. So
yeah, what other people, meaning everybody
Right.
and everything and all dimensions and all times, can see that.
That's right.
It's not just like, oh, well, my wife can see everything behind me. Well, she can see some things.
Well, that's right.
It's the full perspective.
It's the full perspective, and thank goodness, I've had experiences like that. I had a 360-degree review when I was in my 30s, and I remember going through it the first time. It didn't feel very good. It would put me in a place of discomfort.
Nah, that shit don't
I'll
feel
say
good
that
at
much.
all.
It was like an executive training type thing, and my peers were supposed to give me a review.
Yeah.
And I was always good with the people that were my subordinates and my management teams, the people that were reporting into me directly, doing reviews. And I always tended to do pretty well with them, and I always did well with my bosses. But where I didn't do as well was with my peers, right?
Yeah.
Because they would sometimes feel threatened or whatever. I don't know.
Sure.
Right? But I wasn't even aware of it.
You can say
That's
they
the
hating.
point.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. I went back to MBA school when I went back to MBA school because I felt like, I was already more senior in my career path, and I said, but I still want to go
but
back
you
to
need a
MBA
little
school because I
reflection
don't
to
feel
learn
like I
more.
know what I don't know. So maybe if I go back to MBA school, in the world of business, I'll at least learn the limit of my knowledge,
Right.
right? And we have this word, it's a fancy word, entropy, which means chaos, right? Randomness. I don't really believe in randomness, but let's just say that this word exists. And the definition of the word is not truly well understood or well defined. Probably the best way to define it is the boundary of where knowledge ends and ignorance begins. That's entropy. So it's the zone of we don't know what we don't know. So when it comes to our own personalities and our personas and our subconscious minds, by definition, it's in the zone of we don't know what we don't know. So life, I believe, is about us learning to transcend through this polarized perception of vision, seeing the world around us, learning to replace judgment of others with love and acceptance. Because that is tantamount for us to be able to feel the same way and look at ourselves with that same love and acceptance.
It's two ways that you can go. You can go in through love and acceptance for all parts of yourself, what you would typically call shadow work, although that term is, I think, mischaracterized a lot. Because ultimately the shadow is that which you cannot see. So you have to have some process where you can illuminate that which you cannot see,
That's
which
the
often
seeing
involves
the
other
limit
people.
of the, we used to always say in business, right? It's like, I didn't know anything. I couldn't find my ass with both hands, right? That's kind of the saying we would say for someone who's a newbie in a space or category industry. And you kind of have to learn that zone, or even what the context of that learning would be, to be able to reference it to yourself.
Right.
And
Right.
that
Yeah,
is
so
what
use
shadow
other
work
people.
ultimately starts off with.
Yep. So it's either internal work or external work, working on.
Or external.
You hear the stories of different spiritual teachers who have that person that's the hardest for them to love on their altar because they're using the external to learn how to actually love the wholeness of themselves as the universe in a drop rather than a drop in the universe. Kind of changing the Rumi quote around a little bit. One thing that comes up, so many things, so many paths I want to discuss with you here. One thing that comes up that I've noticed recently is, and I say this in like the past year or so, but I've seen it actually play out over time, is there's a quote from Nietzsche, and I don't have the words exactly, but, basically saying, be careful, stare into the abyss, and the abyss stares back at you, right? And I've seen people who've been really focused, not necessarily incorrectly so, although
This is serious though for, people who get overwhelmed and a little bit, neurotic in their researches and stuff. And it goes into the realm of conspiracy theorists. When you start tapping into those dark natures and those deep, dark stories that you're trying to reveal and uncover, sometimes you could get a little bit too wrapped up into it, and you could bring back the energy that you're exactly trying to fight. That's all he's saying. So like staring into the abyss, be careful, because a lot of people go psychotic, tapping into conspiracy theories and crazy shit that they're trying to unearth and bring a little bit of truth to. So yeah, that's a profound statement, man.
though sometimes hyperbolically so, exaggerating the darkness, but looking at the darkness which has exposed itself in the world over the last 2 years. But they've looked so deeply into that darkness, so consistently, every day, every different article, every different way that they can look into the darkness. I've seen the darkness start to creep inside them, inside their own psyche, inside their own, and they're actually in this field, like you were saying, of resonance, where their own judgment and what they're looking at is then starting to actually change their characteristics themselves. And I think this is something to be really mindful of for all of us. Like, be careful staring into the abyss and only the abyss for too long, because it will start
you
to
bring in that energy.
change your very nature. You'll start to become in resonance with the abyss itself.
Do you remember, I think it was, I can remember if it was Batman Begins or The Dark Knight. I think it's The Dark Knight, where the guy that played Two-Face, you may remember this, and it was in the one with Christian Bale as Batman. And there's a quote in it where he says, "Hope that you live long enough to defeat the villain, but not so long that you become the villain."
Yo, Jay-Z had a rap.
He says that to Batman.
He had a bar.
He says
on
it. I can't remember who he says it to. I just remember it's like this scene.
Wow.
It's like when his face got half burned off type of thing.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating because, again, it's this concept of we start off and we all have sort of somewhat of a vigilante in each of us, right? We want to do the right things.
And which is also based on the hubris.
What this does is to prove once
fucking
again
commercials.
how powerful
Get
that
outta here.
symbol of the pyramid actually is.
It's only been in recent years that we've had the technology to actually answer the question, does the shape of a pyramid influence or interact with energy in our world?
The Star
Goddamn right it
David
does.
was created in likeness of the pyramids, but also represents what so much of Egyptian mythology talks about, which is duality.
We feel
We'll
like
get into that.
we see everything better than everybody else, and we should be the arbiter of justice.
Totally.
So let's get on Twitter and fuck that person up for what they said.
No, I
'Cause
saw
we
it.
know what they meant.
I have a perfect example of this week. I have a friend who is super aware and super conscious, and she basically posts on positive stuff all the time. And so this guy goes on her page and he starts saying that she is representing 100% toxic positivity.
That's a good one.
I'm like, toxic positivity. Okay, so let me just grok that for just one moment, right? Toxic positivity. And the first thing that I had to do is, of course, I wanted to go to his page to see what was on his profile. And the first thing that it says is defender of the oppressed and weak. So this is kind of illustrating my point, right? Which
that's
is,
what he's gonna become.
at a certain point, we can become the imp of the perverse and not even realize that it happened
Imp
to
of
us.
the perverse, indeed.
Right. We all want to be the hero, but don't realize that when we start to press our view of the world on the rest of the world around us, then it can take on kind of a very different feel, which becomes one of negativity. As you said, when you go in the cave with the person you're judging, you take
It's
on
like
the characteristics of that
the
cave.
preachers, when they
You
preach
can't
it too
help
hard, it's
but
like,
be
I don't want to hear that. You start
sympathetically
pressing
in
away.
resonance with that cave.
Yeah.
And what we just experienced, right, where we had this beautiful song.
They may
and
be
everything,
doing it for
that
good,
put us
but
in a
it becomes
sympathetic
harmful
resonance
when you
of heart
start
and space,
preaching
right
too
now,
hard.
which is I'm still trying to pull myself out of right now. Thank you.
Yeah. For
Get back
sure.
into my left brain, damn it. And but basically, I think we all fall victim of that. We don't even realize when it's happening to us because it's in the zone of we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. There's a concept in, the Kabbalist mysticism in the Zohar, and it's the idea of the Sitra Akra. And the Sitra Akra is
I know we can
somewhat
see the screen
translated
through
as
my
the upside
glasses.
down, but more literally, it means to, instead of being face to face with the divine, which means in the light, in the truth, in the way, I guess, if you wanted to say it from Jesus's terms, which I don't know if my Jewish ancestors would appreciate me quoting Jesus.
He was Jewish too.
In this term, he was. He was indeed.
Oh, that's a
ultimately,
classic.
like face to face with.
So when they had paused and stopped and was like, and Jesus was a Jew too, they're actually, and I could be blowing it up out of proportion, but I definitely consider that they talking about that Jesus was a black Hebrew. So when they stop and be like, he was a Hebrew too, I know people don't be wanting to bring in color and shit like that, but that's an important part because that's the reason why the Jewish people don't really want to accept Jesus, because he's a Hebrew and he's a Jew as well. And this is the whole situation that the Jews and the Hebrews got a war against. And I know Kanye and Kyrie had talked about that last year, but that was profound right there. Let's keep going.
The divine, which is looking at the light, and that means seeing that all is of God or nothing is, as Paul Selig says. Like, it's all part of the divine emanation. And so to actually have perspective, you have to see everything from every perspective, or at least, even if you can't articulate it, feel that thing. That's face to face. That's the opposite of Sitra Achra. When the moment you move into your separate self, which is to shut off at least the side of your face from the divine, that's creating distortion. So the prism, instead of being a clear prism, face to face with God, the prism has distortion. And the farther you turn away from the divine, the face of the divine, the deeper into Sitra Achra you go. The deeper you go into the upside down, because the more distortion is created until you've literally turned your back on the divine, which means that you believe as your separate self that you are the divine, denying
you become more materialistic that way too.
The state of interbeing that you are with the rest of the world. And then so you're in the deepest distortion, because the light is not
separate from everything.
It's obviously still penetrates through, but it's all distorted. And I think this is the place we're in. We're recognizing that we've all turned our face from the divine in a huge way. And frankly, for good reasons, because God has been one of the, quote, God, and I've said that with quotes,
crazy
God as told by the church has been one of the most oppressive forces in human history.
Hell yeah.
Right? Which obviously isn't the God that we know in our hearts, that is our heart.
So this shit right here is kind of crazy, and I'm pausing here, and I'm sorry to keep pausing, but it's kind of crazy because, most people don't know that the God that they worshiping in the Bible and stuff of this nature, and it could get like a little harmful because it affects people in their religion, and it's like, well, why are a lot of people turning away from Christianity? Is because the truths that they are unearthing through Christianity is like, when you really learn what's really going on, it's like, I've been following this, and we really don't know enough history about it, or we're not deciphering it in the right way. So when he's saying God in the Bible is a tyrant, it's talking about like things of the Crusades and God telling you to kill this amount of people and doing all this crazy shit and kill the babies, and it's like, you think like the ultimate creator want all of that heinous shit going on? Rape these people, take over their land and shit of that nature. That's in the Bible, bro. And people, they kind of turn away from that shit and act like they don't see it in the Bible. Like the Crusades literally is a situation where if you don't get down with this religion, you laying down by the sword, nigga, we taking off your head. That's it. That shit is kind of crazy. Because it's mass manipulation, really. It's not like they're preaching all through love and shit, but it's not really love. It's really mass manipulation. And it's, you get down and lay down, nigga. That's it. They like some of the first gangsters for real.
Parts, exactly, But that force itself has actually twisted us and turned us away from actually even the understanding of God. And then now we're living in this reality where, we're in the Sitra Achra, and now it's time to turn our face back towards the truth, the light, and the divine. And that's kind of what we're all trying to do, is bend our eyes back to the truth.
It's interesting. If you go back thousands of years, I can imagine a shepherd on a hillside, probably somewhere in the Middle East, maybe even, either in the Fertile Crescent or maybe over, somewhere on the Mediterranean where Israel would be today, or Palestine, whatever you want to basically refer to it as, that area. And one man saying, okay, my grass is greener, but when you're there, have you been to Jerusalem? I got to take you. I'm going in February again. But when you're there, it's astounding. If you stand on the Mount of Olives and you look at the Temple Mount, which is called Mount Moriah, across the Valley of Kidron, the Mount of Olives is right beneath you. You're looking down, you can see the east side of the Temple Mount, which is where King Solomon's temple was, right? And then there's another valley on the other side. You really are astounded by the fact that if you just look behind you, you're at the top of the mountain on this side, it's all desert. It's all desert. I mean, there's nothing there. It's nothing. All the way Dead Sea, it's nothing. Then as soon as you're on this one side, of this mountain. All of a sudden, the climate's completely different. It's like this oasis in the middle of the desert. Now, you can see why people fought over this land, because it was about survival, right? It's 100% about survival. So let's say you're a shepherd and you have this flock and you're like, well, this year, the sun's been kind of harsh on my side of the hill. My neighbor over there, he worships a different God. And my God came to me in a dream last night. His grass is really green. And my God came to me and said, you know what? I need to kill him and consecrate his land to my God. And that's a righteous act. We're talking about
And you see what I'm saying? Like, this is where the Bible has some profound and good statements, because it's like, yo, don't trust man, but at the same time, the very books that you're reading is written down by man. So it's like, when people are writing about God or the Almighty or the Creator, they're putting their own twist and spin on it. So just like he's saying right here is like, well, my God told me that I need to kill this guy and take his land. That's what the Crusades is. The Crusades is telling these people that we need to kill everybody that don't get down and lay down with our religion. And they actually, they killed millions of people. And then later on, you see it happening over and over again, because Hitler turns around, he does the same thing. Before Hitler, you got goddamn, I don't know the guy name in Africa, but he killed 20 million Africans, maybe more than that. And it's like, a lot of people don't talk about these things, but they're using mind manipulation to get away with what they did. And if you don't get down with their faction, with their religion, with their beliefs, then you might as well be gone. That shit is not cool.
the beginning of time. The most heinous acts that we can even contemplate in society have been started with that line of thinking.
Yeah. And the conflation of true God with the ego's self-serving bias and the ego's inflationary tendency to be, I am the only God.
That's right. So I'm the defender of the oppressed. I'm the defender of the weak. And I'm the defender of my God. And this concept, I think, is what has been so challenging for humanity.
Right.
And I think it's a construct that's very much tied to dualistic thinking, right?
Yeah.
And I think where we're now transitioning towards is to be able to see more perspectives, more viewpoints. And I think the doorway for me personally was drawing geometry.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, because that's, I think, very important, and also all of the different decoding you've done of all of the people who've been leaving us clues along the way. But just to stick with this point and double click on it one more time, I mean, when Jesus was saying, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," what he was pointing to was the true nature of the divine, which is that you or me living a different life. So killing you is killing me, and so ultimately, we have to figure this out and say,
I am you, you are me.
You got some grass over there. And they got to look at you and say, like, I got some grass over here. I am you, you are me.
Exactly.
Let's work on this together.
Exactly.
Let's fucking figure it out. And in that way, both could be part of the same thing. But in this identity, the self-identification of separateness, separate gods,
I got
self,
Ubuntu written on my board, so I know exactly what he's talking about.
War, conflict, rather than cooperation.
Yeah, we just lose sight of the fact that I tend to think of the universe less as a universe and more as a you-inverse. So if you start to think that because I can't separate myself from my own conditioning biases, I can't separate the lens of my perception from all of the history.
All right, we about to wrap it up here soon, but I just wanted to do a little bit of reactionary video to what they were talking about, because some of it is like more of a reflection. But you have to internalize things, and you sometimes, to internalize and get more information, you gotta, when he's talking about entropy, you kind of gotta let your mind explore out, right, and be a little bit more open to receive back in more things. Yeah, and like once again, my whole theme for this year is like based in the energy of truth. So the truth is stranger than fiction, and sometimes the truth hurt, and sometimes we don't want to accept the truth because you've been told a lie so goddamn long, man. So it's just like some of these conspiracy theories and stuff we could throw away, but some things we got to bring into question to get the full like truth, to get the full scope on what's really going on. And so they were just talking about exploring geometry and stuff to open up different pathways in your mind. And I've done this like plenty of times, which is a weird thing. Like once you start tapping into like Euclidean science and how shapes come together and how reality is kind of like pixelated, it kind of like it opens your mind up to like explore newer things. And we're going to like talk about that in upcoming episodes. But this reaction was really good though. Give me feedback in the comments, and I'll be back in the future with some more videos. Shenanigans with B, man. I'm out.